Video games may be developed by large groups of people with all sorts of different jobs, at least most of the time, but typically the general shape and feel of the title will be moulded by one specific person, the game designer. These folks are responsible for just about everything the game needs to have in order to function. That is, they are the ones behind the plot, character, design, and general direction of the title overall, and are the driving force behind ensuring that their vision becomes a cohesive final product that represents one specific creative whole. Many designers are so consistent with their visions as to be instantly recognizable when we play their games, and we've gathered together some of the most distinctive that we could find for today's list. These are the folks who tend to stick to one style, aesthetically or narratively, oftentimes both, and who have made a name for themselves thanks to how clearly they're able to communicate their specific visions. I'm Ashton from Triple Jump, and here are the 10 video game designers with the most distinctive styles. Number 10, Will Wright. Co-founder of Maxis, Will Wright is the mind behind a good number of the titles in the original Sims series. Not Sims series, although yes, he is also responsible for those. No, I was initially referring to the likes of SimCity, SimAnt, SimEarth, and SimCopter, all of which were brought about thanks to Wright and the many innovations he made on the genre he helped pioneer. SimCity is the one that started it all, becoming an instant sensation once players got a hold of it and were able to build the city of their dreams and then obliterate it even more quickly. After finding significant success with other simulation titles, he was finally able to hit upon the absolute moneymaker that was The Sims, scaling down the massive previous games to focus on a single family at a time. Even the strange experiment that was Spore had the unmistakable fingerprints of Wright all over it, with its customizable beings and lofty world-building ideals that admittedly fell a bit short of expectation, but led to plenty of the same type of goofy fun that could be had in The Sims. It would be hard to imagine the world without games in the simulation genre at this point, and we have Will Wright to thank for it. Number 9, Fumito Ueda. Though his back catalogue of games is shorter than the vast majority of people on this list, Fumito Ueda has a very specific style that has led to beloved classics that are truly unlike anything else that has been seen in the industry, and which are unmistakable in their presentation. To be less cryptic about it, this one man is the designer responsible for the unique puzzle adventures that are Eco, Shadow of the Colossus, and The Last Guardian. Each of these titles is known for and recognizable by its minimalistic storytelling and aesthetic, which presents the world with a desaturated color palette that adds to the overall sense of melancholy and otherworldly strangeness that gives each game its distinct feeling. Some of the influences behind these titles include platformers such as Flashback, Another World, The Legend of Zelda, and the one that seems most at odds, Prince of Persia, but all of these have been blended together with Ueda's specific creative vision to create experiences unlike those found anywhere else. It has already been some years since The Last Guardian released, but there has been a potential hint implying that he has a new game in the works, so it's unlikely we've heard the last from Ueda. Number 8, Kim Swift. If you're a fan of Portal, and let's be honest, virtually everyone is, then you are already aware of Kim Swift's most famous physics-centric work. However, she has a couple of other puzzle games in her repertoire as well. The first is Narbacular Drop, something she created with fellow graduates of DigiPen Institute of Technology, and which eventually caught the eye of Gabe Newell, who was so impressed that he employed the whole team. Once at Valve, they were able to build upon the Portal puzzle game and make it into one of the biggest surprise hits ever. Alongside her work on Portal, Swift has also had input on both of the follow-up episodes of Half-Life 2 and both Left 4 Dead titles. But even though she left Valve for Airtight Games in 2009 and wasn't involved in Portal 2, her adventures into physics-based puzzle games hadn't stopped yet. Once she got to her new company, she ended up creating Quantum Conundrum, another puzzler that allowed players to mess around with the state of the room around them as they tried to make their way out. This time, however, they would have to use different dimensions of reality in order to escape. Swift ended up joining the Google Stadia development studio, but with its dissolution, it's hard to tell what to expect from her next. Number 7, Goichi Suda. There are a few people in the industry who have made a significant name for themselves, simply thanks to their quirky original ideas. But Goichi Suda is definitely one of them. More commonly known as Suda51, based on a pun of his given name, he is best known for games of flashy combat, crazy premises, and over-the-top characters. Probably the first game that really showed off Suda's specific style was the extremely strange Killer 7, which featured a group of assassins who all ended up becoming embroiled in some sort of conspiracy, and somehow that may just be the least crazy of all of his games. Gotta start somewhere, I suppose. Next came No More Heroes, with its similar flashy combat and another memorable protagonist, though admittedly just the one this time. Then after that and its first sequel came Shadow of the Damned and Lollipop Chainsaw, both of which are a bit out there, feature a sassy protagonist with a frankly bizarre sidekick, and somehow manage to share very similar styles despite being completely opposite in terms of colour palettes. Despite all of these games having quite different stories, the quirkiness of their presentation and the humour across the board are unmistakable and quite unlike anything else. Number 6, Jane Jensen. Though she may have started her career at Sierra, it wasn't long before Jane Jensen made a name for herself on her own merits. Most notably, she was responsible for the Gabriel Knight series, which started in 1993 with Gabriel Knight Sin of the Fathers, and got 2 sequels before the turn of the millennium. Each installment of this point-and-click adventure received well above average review scores almost across the board, and won multiple awards for Adventure Game of the Year. But none of them were ever massive financial successes, and she was forced to move on after the 3rd title. That wasn't the end of her career in the games industry though, and over the years, she's also had a hand in several Agatha Christie adaptations, as well as the Women's Murder Club series, and even racked up a number of other hidden object and point-and-click adventure titles that were all in a similar vein to her previous work. Most recently, she's focused primarily on writing novels, under the name Eli Easton, with her most recent games being Mobius Empire Rising and a 20th anniversary edition of Gabriel Knight, both of which were released in 2014. Whether or not she ever returns to the games industry, she's certainly left her mark on the point-and-click landscape. Number 5, Amiya Reo. All of the people on this list definitely have a distinctive style that can be felt throughout their games. That is kind of the whole point of this list, after all. But perhaps none is so visually consistent as the games that have come from Amiya Reo. Alongside Greg Kasavin, Reo is co-founder and designer of Supergiant Games, who are known for Bastion, Transistor, and Pyre, as well as Hades, a tiny game that absolutely no one has ever heard of because it flew completely under the radar when it came out. Sarcasm, naturally. The first 3 of these titles are action RPGs, while Hades is a bit of an outlier as a roguelike. But despite branching out to new genres, every single one of the games are instantly recognizable thanks to their distinctive art style and isometric perspective, with Reo having hit upon a fantastic aesthetic that he has stuck with in order to create a cohesive portfolio. Though this may not be a lot to go on, it's clear from the style alone that he definitely has a specific vision for the type of games he wants to make, and after the success of Hades, we most likely haven't seen anywhere near the last of it. Number 4, Roberta Williams. In 1979, Roberta Williams, along with her husband Ken, founded Sierra Online and became responsible for the brutally hard point-and-click games the company ended up becoming synonymous with. At the time, Williams was a huge text adventure fan and used this experience to come up with the story, while her husband focused on the technical side of things. This resulted in Mystery House, a huge success that's often credited as being the first graphic adventure game, and things only improved from there. After this initial success, she debuted several more graphic adventure titles before hitting upon the one that would really elevate her into the spotlight, King's Quest. The series was a hit from the beginning, and spawned at least 7 sequels over the course of a decade and a half, basically cementing Williams and Sierra as the best source of games for fans of point-and-click adventures. She was also responsible for the Laura Bow games, as well as Mixed Up Mother Goose, and probably the most anomalous title of the lot, Phantasmagoria. After King's Quest Mask of Eternity, she disappeared from the gaming world, only resurfacing recently with a Colossal Cave remake. Though this is probably the last we'll see of her in the gaming world, her impact on the industry cannot be understated. Number 3, American McGee. American McGee is to the gaming world what Tim Burton is to films, known primarily for his dark and twisted tales that have become massive cult classics that are incredibly well loved to this day. This only really became true in 2000, however, after he had been let go by id Software and moved on to join EA, where he was able to create the first of many games that would showcase his specific style, Alice, or American McGee's Alice if you want to get serious about this. The title was popular enough that plans were in the works for both a movie adaptation and a spin-off, though both of these fell through in the end. Fortunately for fans though, McGee was able to keep the dark retelling trend going with the full sequel, Alice Madness Returns, and after that, in 2008, he did it again with the episodic adventure Grimm, based instead on the already quite dark, traditional Grimm's fairy tales. Even Scrapland, the sci-fi flavoured title that he created, still had something recognisably McGee about it, especially in the otherworldly dialogue and the movement of the characters. And Bad Day LA. Well, the less said about that one the better, actually. He has since retired and the planned sequel Alice Asylum has been cancelled, but hey, at least we'll always have Alice. Number 2, Hideo Kojima. It would be hard to do a list like this and not include Hideo Kojima on it somewhere, because his specific style of cinematic video games is perhaps the most noticeable and famous in the world of interactive entertainment. Though he is by far best known for the Metal Gear series, Kojima got his true start with Snatcher, a cyberpunk graphic adventure that was heavily inspired by films such as Akira, Blade Runner, and Invasion of the Body Snatchers, and it's this film-based influence that can be felt in all of his games. The most divisive and probably weirdest of his creations thus far, Death Stranding, is where he was fully allowed to explore what exactly it was he wanted to create, mainly because he didn't have anyone around him to rein him in a bit when it seemed like he maybe had gone a bit too far. Arguably, he doesn't stick to one genre as much as many of the other designers on this list have, but it's impossible to mistake his creative direction for anyone else's. Whether you're a fan or not, it's hard to deny the impact he and his auteur vision have had on the industry over the past years, and he likely won't be stopping anytime soon. And number 1, Tim Schafer. Yet another of the names on this list, who is responsible for a number of fantastic games that have ended up primarily as cult classics. Tim Schafer has somehow managed to keep all of the games that he's been involved with over the years consistent in tone, irreverence, and most of all, comedic value, making quite a name for himself and becoming one of the most recognisable people in the industry. This started way back when he was part of LucasArts, working on titles like The Secret of Monkey Island, Day of the Tentacle, Full Throttle, and Grim Fandango, all of which are stellar games, but it didn't stop there. After leaving the studio and founding his own, Double Fine, the first game that came out of it was Psychonauts, which became yet another classic and even got a sequel 16 years later, elevating it into the public consciousness once again. Then there was Brutal Legend, the stealth RTS that was surprisingly good at everything it was trying to do. All of these games, spanning several decades, have stayed consistent both in tone and quality, and have made it so that it would be impossible to mistake Tim Schafer's influence for anyone else's.